This podcast is a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro and is a production of VI Alliance, copyright 2019. And this chart-busting hit, Alone Leave Me, courtesy of New Threads, is available everywhere. This is Julie, and I'm here with Susan, and we have another edition of Ancient Texts. And this time we're going to talk about The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. You can find this online. I think you can also find it as a video on YouTube where he possibly does it himself. And you could probably find it for sale as a book as well. This is related to what I'm always kind of alluding to is the 1950s authors. And yet, the reason why I call them the 1950s authors is because they're born sometime in the late 1800s. Yet in the 1950s, all this material was coming out by Neville Goddard, and it became the New Thinkers. It's a very short read, and it talks about, quote-unquote, the strangest secret. You know, you can look it up and find the background on Earl Nightingale, and there is a background. He was described as a Depression-era child. And that's why I think he was also probably in the Marines in 1941 in Pearl Harbor. So just estimating, you know, how old he is from that standpoint, that's where I was kind of alluding to. It's part of the 1950s writers. Yeah. And actually the story of this is he was going on vacation and he had a radio show. He was going on a vacation for an extended period of time.
That's like us.
Yeah, there you go. And his sales manager begged him to leave some kind of inspirational words on record that they could use. And the recording became The Strangest Secret. It was the first spoken word message to win a gold record by selling over 1 million copies. And I guess somewhere along the line, however he had made his money, he owned an insurance company, and all his insurance sellers listened to this. Yeah. And
well, what the heck happened between all these people that listened to it in today's world?
I don't know. That's what I've been investigating in the 1950s. Yeah, from those writers.
So the thing with this is you know, what's interesting is this, like all other books, goes into the energy, and it goes into you are what you think, and we can go into detail. But the one point that I wanted to make at this point with what you just said is that throughout the whole thing, he talks about not being a follower.
Right.
That is, I mean, every one of these books, I always sort of look for the one gem that's a little bit different. And that's what I get with this book, is he says, do not follow what everybody else does, because that is man's downfall, is we just follow what everyone else does, and we don't think. And it's funny that you say this and you talk, because my book didn't talk about the author, because I'm looking at your handout and it talks about the author. Mine didn't. And the thing is that based on what you're telling me and based on what I just read, what the heck happened?
Yeah.
You know, like they talk about the Incas and or the Mayans, and they're like, all these amazing civilizations, where'd they go? That's you know, when I look into the historical account, they say, where did these great civilizations go? Where did all these people who read this and listened to it? What happened? Where'd they go?
And you know what's really cool about us collaborating and doing these podcasts is you approach it from that end, and of course, you know, I approach it from the other end, because I want to know who these people were talking to in the 1950s, that they're all coming upon the same consensus about this self-improvement versus self-help. Self-help kind of came afterwards, which ruined everything.
Which was like a hijacked subset of what it really was. It's you know, went with the premise that there was a problem.
Right.
This didn't. Right. This went with, no, everything's good, but let's do better.
Right. Let's go further.
Right.
Let's expand upon this. Let's move and propel. And, you know, it's funny because in the version I have, it says that this amazing message, quote unquote, was first played for a group of salespeople at his insurance agency. And when you think about salespeople, I mean, you know, back in the day, whatever, who knows, but you know, with salespeople, you have to be creative and you have to sell, And it says that they were utterly electrified by it. And as I was reading it, it's very laced with suggestion, and it kind of goes along with in the lines of the Joseph Murphy book.
Yes.
We have The Power of Your Subconscious Mind that we're talking about too in this series. And it's very simple to read, and I agree with you. It's like, what happened to that energy? Yet I'm also interested in, where did it come from?
Right. Well, I mean, this is from the 50s. And we also go back to the texts from thousands of years ago. We look at Lao Tzu, we look at some of the Kabbalion, which I know is based on Hermes Trismegistus.
Yep.
Doing better. And, I mean, we're going to do the Yellow Emperors, the Yellow Emperor. And these are based on, way back when, texts that are thousands of years old. So it's so funny because you asked that, and then I asked the same thing of, well, what happened? This is the 50s. So that's the other side of it. That's the 50s, almost 70 years ago.
Right.
Okay? But it's not like it was 7,000 years ago or 700 years ago that we should be able to track, where are these people? And no, I know most of them have passed on, but the ones that listened, and then, it says in here he played it for their families, for their kids. What happened?
Right. And
did the whole Oprah get together and self-help, everything's wrong, there's something wrong with all of us, and therefore we're lashing out and we're victims and we deserve better? I mean, did that override all of this? What happened? That's what makes me question.
Right.
And the part about this book that I really love, like there's a few parts in here that, it's a quick read, but the part that I found interesting, if I can find it, is, he talks about the number of people that start off. 100 individuals start off at the age of 25, and they all have hopes and dreams and ideas, and then at the age of 65, he's like, usually 5% has succeeded.
Right.
And he gives a new definition of success. He describes that, which he calls, quote, success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. He doesn't put money in. He doesn't talk about, a size 2 dress. He doesn't say, Mercedes-Benz and, any of that. It's the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And what I love about that is there's no definition for worthy ideal.
Right.
Everybody has their own definition. And therefore, if you have an ideal of what you're working towards, and for us to really do it, the other part in here is when he says we have to think for ourselves. We have to learn to think again because we don't think. Why do you do whatever it is you do? Work here, do that, because everybody does that. We know, I hate to say it, I mean, we're in the midst of the college scams now, that people went to college and they got in by bribing and paying this money so their kid, who really in many cases didn't even want to go but had that on their resume, which didn't matter, they didn't have the backup to it, and it's like, what the heck happened? There's someone who really strives to learn whatever it is that institution can give to them, and that doesn't mean every institution is the answer. It's whatever you need to realize your dream. Right. And if you step away from, well, I need to have Harvard on my resume, nothing against Harvard. Harvard does a lot of great things for the right people. Right. If you don't need that Ivy League school, then you look at what your real dream is. But if, you have to have a big name so that you could go off and say, yes, my kid went here, and so your mom and dad can do this, and so you can do. What dream? You're just following the leader. Right. You're supposed to have a nice car. You're supposed to get married. 2.5 kids. White picket fence. What?
And that's the big word that he brings out is we conform. And that's why things don't occur. And in that quote that you gave, success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, I think it's really important when he says that it's a predetermined ideal, and that's what the person deliberately decides to do. And there's something powerful to that. I mean, it's deliberately. And I
laugh because nobody has any deliberate. Everyone just goes
conformity. It's conforming. This is what you're supposed to do. This is right. And a lot of times, you're creating, what's occurring anyway. So you're, predetermining what's going to occur anyway. Yet, everything is really deliberate, what you're deciding to do.
Right.
So if, there's quote unquote failures that you feel as where you end up in your life, what he's stating here is that, it's kind of where you went with it. And if you conformed, then you became that larger percentage.
But you can change. The beautiful thing that he says is it's not like, oh, I failed. It's
right.
like you can change at any given point in time. Change your mindset. I'm just being personal at this moment. Anything we talk, right now, what I'm doing, and whenever I hear a certain word, instead of going with what everybody says, it's almost like a trigger for me. I go the opposite, even if it makes no sense. I hear something, a certain trigger word, I go the opposite. And there's many times that I'm like, I can't reconcile it, but I know it's the truth.
Right.
And at any given point, anyone can change from conforming to saying, I'm going to think for myself, just think.
Right. And when you're thinking, you're deliberately making actions to do what your goals are and what you're deciding for yourself, rather than thinking that you're just shaped by the circumstances that go on around you. And there's a huge power to that. And then when he brings it down into thought, because, again, Joseph Murphy's the same way, too. Yeah. We become what we think about.
Right.
And so that's a huge question to ask yourself, even when you wake up in the morning. How many times you want to ask it all day long? What am I thinking about? Well, guess what? You're becoming what you're thinking about. If you're worrying about what you're going to do, quote unquote, when you're 65 and you retire, and where you're going to live, and how you're going to blah, blah, blah. That's what you're creating. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yep. You're going to create it.
Self-fulfilling prophecy occurs when you're worrying about this, and he talks about worry at some point in here. And really, how useful is worry? It's not.
No, it's not. And it's interesting because if you think, what do I want to do? We're doing this podcast because we love these books. Sometimes it's a challenge because we're also writing and we're doing other things along the way. But these podcasts, it's reading and going through this and discussing it and really sharing. Sometimes we have to sit and stop our conversations because we go so deep. It's like, wait a minute. We got to go back. And isn't that more fun to be in this space? What do I want to do right now? What's improving me? What makes me... And when I read these books, sometimes we all have tough days. We all have those days when something gets us down. Everyone does. And sometimes, it's figuring out what is it that pulls you out of it. Sometimes when I read these, it's like, all right, let me be clear. What do I know? Okay, challenges appeared today and I'm feeling defeated. If that's how I feel, I got to do it again tomorrow. And I sometimes push myself like, damn, I got to do it again tomorrow because it's going to work. And that's where I keep my thoughts. Like, I'm all right, what can I do? Sometimes what can I do different?
And that's really important because look where you went with that. You went into a reflection of what is my goal, and you took yourself, into a different energy.
But it takes work. It takes work. But something, it's like anything. When do we talk about work? Work is really all that matters. It's the work that matters in life. And that's where this thinking differently is. A lot of people, if you're listening to this, kudos to you, because most people, I think, they like to be in the energy of us when we talk. But the minute when we turn around and say, you can do this yourself. I don't want to hear anything about it. You're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, oh, forget it.
Yeah.
They want to feel that energy. Give me more.
Right.
But, so one of the things with these, the podcast, hopefully, is it gives you an idea of new books to read. And it forces the person to think differently, but you got to do the work.
Right.
But it's the only work, I'm going to say, and I've done a lot of different things, the only work worth doing.
And it also opens up the energy of a conversation about it that gets you into a different space. And in that space, you can further... It's interesting because he talks about the human mind is much like a farmer's land.
Oh, yeah.
And it's great because you hear about that. All right, what seeds are you planting? And you think about that. Yet also the contrast to that is what he states is, the land doesn't care. If you plant poison, it's going to grow poison. And it's an interesting visual because, wouldn't you rather grow corn than poison? So what are you really planting? And so what are you thinking about? And, where are your goals and what is your projection of that in the energy of the space that you're in as well?
The one thing I think he says about doing something small. Like if you're not sure how you feel about all this, you do something small and see how it goes. And like I said, in the beginning, it's like anything. It's changing your habit. And actually, the one thing I've realized is it's so easy to go negative.
Right.
Oh,
right.
God, it's so easy because everybody trains you to do that. But sit and say it again. And it takes a little bit of work at first. When you say, all right, this is what occurred. Had a bad day, whatever. Sometimes, like you said, you got to put on something, a funny movie, read a book, or you listen to music. And then you kind of pull yourself out of it and then say, all right, I got to go again tomorrow. I got to do this differently. I got to do it better.
Right.
And sometimes that's, for me, I'm just sharing. That's the best I can do. Sometimes if I'm really having a really hard time, something really upset me, sometimes that's the best I can do. But I will at least stop of going into the poison, as you said.
Right, because you can get paralyzed.
Stop yourself is even half the battle.
Because you can get paralyzed by your thoughts too, in that sense. And so, what are you thinking of? And it's funny because there's this great part in here too that I think is really important, where he talks about as our mind is standard equipment at birth. It's free, and things that are given to us for nothing, we place little value on. Things that we pay money for, we value. And there's such a great, and he even says it, there's a paradox to that, and it's so wonderful because your mind is so powerful. And this Earl Nightingale is so full of suggestion. And as you're reading it, you're entertaining your mind and you're changing the vibration of your mind. And, it's beautiful the way he says, everything that's really worthwhile in life came to us free. Our minds, our souls, our bodies, our hopes, our dreams, our ambitions, our intelligence, our love of family and children and friends and country. All these priceless possessions are free, but the things that cost us money are actually very cheap and can be replaced at any time. To add to that, I'm going to quote, because I'm about numbers, and I'm going to quote, he says, the estimates by the experts in this field are that most of us are using somewhere around 5% of our real potential. Some experts say as little as 1%. And this is still a quote. It means that we are only giving about 5% of ourselves to what we're doing, to our days, our work, our families, everyone we know, our entire environment. But it also means that we are only experiencing 5% of the fun, 5% of the joy, 5% of the rewards we could be knowing, or less. All the experts are agreed that in each of us, and I believe this wholeheartedly, there are deep reservoirs of ability, even genius, that we habitually fail to use. That to me is the other side of it, is when you conform, we all have a genius within us. I know to my core that exists. Not one person is the genius of everything. We each have a genius within us, and that's creative talent and ability, whatever it is. Not one person's the genius, and the rest of us just fall in line behind. Right.
And the minute you conform, we just wipe that all away. And he does say in here, I think it is in here, that as little boys and little girls go to school, it's like fit in, go fit in, go fit in. And something, none of us are meant to fit in. And I love when I read something that I know in my heart, and I see it, and it's like, okay, not that I need confirmation, but it rings true. And I just think that when you leave conformity aside and you just be who you are and you don't come out as a victim, you acknowledge if you had something, I'm not saying you ignore it, but you move beyond it and then you become this gifted individual. Everyone becomes a gifted individual.
Right. And it takes a bit of acknowledging your own power. And if that power is in your mind, that's huge.
Yeah.
And when he says, that every one of us is the sum total of our thoughts. That's just so vast and so deep that, that can be crippling if you're worrying all the time, or it can be so energized and so beneficial if you're just in the presence of, your goals and obtaining them and reaching them, and you keep moving.
You and I said in our book, Energetic Invocations, you know what, it's two sides of the coin. If you're part of the problem, you have a part of the solution.
Right.
And if you recognize that you are part of that problem, well, therein lies your solution to change and rid yourself of the problem. Right. Some people don't want to see that. They don't want to realize they're a part of the problem, because then that means, damn, I got to do the work?
Right.
But we said that in the book, and to me, it's empowering. And each day we learn more of, I'm like, I created this so I can undo it. I can change it.
Right. And there's a beautiful line in here where he says, we are where we are because that's exactly where we really want or feel we deserve to be, whether we'll admit that or not.
And that's huge.
And the crux of this is, just think how powerful that is. You're guided by your own mind. So, what are you thinking about? What are you projecting? And what kind of work are you doing to get there and to move through it?
So the interesting thing is that, this stuff that we're talking about is not self-help.
No.
In any way, shape, and form. It is really, if you're listening to this and if you read the books, you'll feel it. You feel the truth of it. Because you talk about aha moments, please. This is like mind-boggling when you get to that point and you start opening up to that idea and then you start using it.
Thank you for listening to this production from EI Alliance. Check out our Amazon authors pages for books and podcasts. Find New Threads music and their latest album on iTunes, Spotify, and newthreads.us.